Ladies and gentlemen, hello, greetings. I just gotta say this. Welcome. I'm sorry, audience. I'm just really fired up right now because I can't begin to tell you how happy I am that my buddy Nate and I are bringing you this next video in our comic cave series. Nate, would you like to say hi to the beautiful people out there?
How we doing, people? It's been a while, huh?
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
It's good that
Kyle,
we're
what are
it's
we doing today? I mean, they already know because it's probably in the description.
Yes, but because we're considerate sort of people, today, all you beautiful people out there, we are doing Batman the Dark Knight Returns. Oh my gosh, I cannot begin to tell you how excited I am to, talk about this and whatnot, because
Oh, yeah.
I've heard from so many people just how intriguing this Batman comic is. And I mean that was what initially fueled my curiosity for this and whatnot.
Me too. I'm happy we both have the exact same copy. I've got my library copy here, and they have the exact same 30th anniversary edition that you have. So yours probably has what the alternate covers. It probably has what
It's got
some of these illustrations.
actually let me see. Let me try to wait a minute. Hold on here a minute. I mean it's got this. I don't know if this qualifies or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, it's got this. I don't know if yours has similar-ish to that, but like I know that mine does. I'm fairly certain if I look in some of the other spots of my book, mine probably has, similar to what your thing has with that one pencil sketching thing that yours has. Mine might have it.
Yeah.
I can't remember specifically because I can't remember the section of where that is. But no, I do. But no, I think it's safe to say the innards of my book and your book are pretty similar to one another and whatnot.
Yeah, it has a fantastic introduction by Frank Miller. So it's 30 years in the
Hmm.
future from the original
Hmm.
one. Brian Azzarello, who I think I didn't read I'll be honest, I did not read I skipped to the comic book part of the comic book. I did not read the entire introduction. But
No, no, no.
but Brian
That's
Azzarello, who I believe one of the editors from the
yeah.
story, and an editor and artist and that kind of thing.
Brian and Frank, they have this really good forward slash introduction in the very beginning of the book itself, and it is audience, just so you know, it is so extensive. There's a whole lot of stuff here to like read and get into. Just in case any of you lovely people are, curious about getting a copy of this, the forward is very, there's a lot of meat and potatoes there to really digest with, because they really delve into a lot of questions about the writing, the background, and some of the factors that came into bringing this, together.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. I was watching interviews with Frank Miller
Hmm.
and some other people
Yep.
before we started this, just to get some a little more background idea about the artist,
Yep.
because I'd read some Frank Miller before. I've read a little bit of Sin City. I've read Hard Boiled.
Yeah.
None of the Daredevil stuff. Not Ronin either. But anyway, in the interview, he's excited to talk about Ronin. And when someone
Hmm.
asks him in this interview from 1987 about where he thinks comics are going to go, he
Hmm.
says, "I'm going to have a better idea of what the form is going to look like." And he goes, "Oh, I don't know, 30 years. So get back to me in 30 years." So
Yeah.
from 87, that would have been 2017.
Yeah.
So this would have been around.
Yeah.
This actually would have been exactly around the time that he would have considered it. So I think it would.
Hmm.
I think you can read a fuller idea of an artist's thoughts on what he did and what he wants to see in the medium in
Yeah.
almost the exact time frame he's talking about,
Yeah.
which I thought was kind of cool. In
Yeah.
this 30, so that's why I think the 30th edition special
Yeah.
probably your best investment if you want to read it and get like the
Oh,
full view of. I think that's probably the best way to read it if you ask me.
yeah.
I just got lucky it being the exact one at the library. But yeah, go if you're interested and you don't want any spoilers. I don't think we'll probably avoid those
Yeah, we're
in this
gonna
video
try
for
to
this.
keep those as much on the down low as possible.
Yes. But if you're afraid of anything being spoiled in this video, just go out and get it right now.
Please, for the love of all those holy, do that.
Then come back and finish the video.
Yes. But for all of you people who decided to stick around, we're happy that you're still here because now we are gonna really dive into the nitty-gritty of
Gritties.
of this really of in my opinion, probably one of the most solid comic books I think I've read in my entire life.
Yeah, it's got to be up there for me too. It's not better than I thought it would be, but it's as good as everybody sold it as, which is pretty hard to do for something cast as one of the greatest comics of all time. I'm like, it better be one.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Nate, I'm just curious. Initially, what was your initial experience with this comic? Like how did it
Oh,
come on your radar and what got you
so
to like dive into it and whatnot?
well, I'll tell you, you inviting me to do this video is what made me finally read it
Mm-hmm.
this year.
Yeah.
But my first encounter with the Dark Knight Returns Batman
Mm-hmm.
probably would have been as a kid when I was reading through let's see here. It's called something like the Batman Rogues Gallery or like the Batman Encyclopedia or something. There were these like
Mm-hmm.
promotional comics that DC Comics would put out for it was like to get you into the characters
Yeah.
if you couldn't read the full thing yet. I loved
Yeah.
it, and I remember turning the pages of like seeing that because they had the different versions of Batman in here.
Mm-hmm.
They have like 1930s Batman, they have 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They have like oh here's the different
Just
styles
the
that people had,
different
and then they get to
variations.
1980, yeah, and then you get to the and then I flip to the 80s. And they have that horrific looking Hulk-like Batman where he's covered in blood, his teeth are all messed up, his clothes are shredded,
He's
and you
seen
go, whoa, whoa.
he's seen stuff, hasn't he?
Yeah, it was just so it's like even as
Yeah.
9 or 10 year old, I think like, oh, this is way different than any of these other Batman
Yeah. Yeah.
prior to now. I'm gonna skip over this one. It's too scary for me.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, but anyway, that was my initial run-in with
Mm,
with Frank Miller, first of all. But the initial run-in with The Dark Knight Returns
mm,
was seeing that famous image
hmm.
of old man Batman being tattered from his resuming
Is
of his Batman duties after 20
yeah.
years
Yeah.
of being off the rooftops.
Oh man, dude,
But
that's the
that was me, man. That was just people like, whoa, being scared.
dude, that's no, that's well, hey, that's interesting. You know, that kind of your initial fear of that was kind of what drove your, curiosity into, finding out about it. Like what's interesting for me is that like how I found out about this was a couple of different ways. One was like I'd heard about this and like other videos that people of other comic book ilk have talked about and whatnot. And like initially I was just like, maybe I'll read this, maybe I won't, I don't know. And then what was it? In my area at my job, this wonderful guy who would later become one of my best coworker buddies. His name is David. He told me about this and he was just like, hey, if you're a fan of Batman, check this out. I'm like, come on. And he's like, no, I'm serious, check it out. If you're a fan of like Christian Bale's Batman, Ben Affleck's Batman, you will check this out. And I'm like, all right. And then I bought this on Amazon just kind of on a whim, and I'm not even making this up. Within like the first 4 or 5 pages, I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'm invested. I want to, know more about this. I want to invest, all of me in this and whatnot. And like here's the thing. Up until this point, like I kind of had an idea of what Frank Miller was like as like a comic creator and whatnot because I'd kind of glanced at Sin City in the past and whatnot, but like beyond that, I didn't know what else he had done. I kind of knew about like 300, some of his work on Daredevil and whatnot, but like I didn't know about anything else beyond crap. I didn't even know he did this until I got my copy, and then I was like, he made this? What?
Yeah, which is funny because it's like it's what he's best known for now. Like it's the only thing some people ask him about in interviews. It's like, what
Yeah.
about Batman? He goes like, I've done like 50 other things. They're like, yes, yes, yes. But anyway, back to Batman. They're like, no.
Yeah, it's like, no, I want to talk about other stuff, not just
which
this.
which is funny. It's like, which is funny because like, for him as an artist, dude, he never seems resentful to talk about it. Like, it's still such a cool. Like, he understands that it is this big. Like, because he took it seriously, it was as big. Like,
Yeah.
maybe not like a magnum opus or ultimate
Mhm.
project, but it was a huge deal
Yeah,
at the
this
time and continues to be. So that's got to be. I think for him, it's still kind of rewarding for that to be the case, even
yeah,
if some of his other stuff is lesser known because of that.
for a lot of people, this for Frank Miller is kind of like what Vince, and I'm not trying to in any way like lump these two together, but Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns for people is kind of like what Vincent Van Gogh's Starry Night is for some people and whatnot, just
Yeah, it's
because.
just sort of emblematic of
Yeah,
the art of the whole art form
yeah,
of
yeah,
like for yeah, I
yeah.
see what you're saying.
Yeah. And I, no, I just say, like I said, I just find that hilarious whenever, people talk to Frank Miller and they're just like, and he's like, and they're like, yes, 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 but you made this. And he's like, but I want to talk about other stuff. I don't want to focus or dwell on this specifically.
Yeah, yeah, I always appreciate that. You're talking about going between art forms, the way that like Starry Night is. If you don't know anything about painting at all, you don't have to. If you've seen, you could pick anybody right now. As soon as you said that, pictured Starry Night in their heads, like they know
Yeah.
exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Like, or if you just say if you say Van Gogh, that's the Van
Hmm.
Gogh they go to. No one,
Yeah.
most people don't, or maybe the sunflower or something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like some people talk about the Dark Knight Returns to get people into comics
Yeah.
the way people used to talk about Cowboy Bebop to get people into anime.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like
Yeah.
it's like, no, no, this isn't like this other kid stuff. This is the real deal. There's some
Yeah.
grimy, gritty noir stuff. There's sex appeal. There's violence. There's cool
There's
stuff going on.
drugs, there's music.
Yeah, there's trenchant intrigue,
It's it's
if I'm
it's
using
a
that
it's
correctly.
it's a it's a mishmash stew of a lot of different things that somehow, okay, I
Yeah,
can't explain how I can here's the thing. I could probably write a thesis explaining Cowboy Bebop, but the truth is, even after I did that, I probably couldn't humanically explain how the anime itself works. It just does.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's it's a style that a lot of people like and have tried to
Mhm.
replicate or drew eyes to things that were similar to it. Like I
Yeah.
think if you watch Bebop, they might go like, "Oh, have you seen Samurai Champloo, his other work?" Or, "Oh, maybe you'd like
Yeah.
Trigun."
Yeah.
Or maybe you'd like Big O or something. I think people would do the
Yeah.
same thing with Dark Knight Returns, where you'd say like,
Oh,
"Oh,
oh
hey,
yeah.
have you ever read The Killing Joke?
Yeah.
Or have you read these other like, hey, if this got you into superhero comics, maybe read like here's a Green Lantern comic that's like that. Here's Superman Red Sun that has some like the same sort of like political stakes and social commentary in it, and that kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's yeah, no,
Yeah.
Frank Miller definitely brings his A game when it comes to, this.
Yeah, it's which is interesting because I know some of his more recent stuff and even the stuff from like the early to mid 2000s is
Hmm.
criticized pretty heavily as,
Hmm.
being a sort of like lesser Frank Miller and people who miss the Daredevil days, they miss Dark Knight Returns, or they didn't like some part of Sin City or something. You're probably getting the best of Frank Miller through here. So if you want to be introduced to him as an artist as well, well worth getting hold of this one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man.
Oh yeah. And by the way, all you lovely people, here's the thing. Nate and I, we wouldn't be saying what we're saying about this half-heartedly. No. We genuinely mean what we're saying about this. We definitely back this, this book with our full, support and whatnot.
Yeah.
It is that good. It really is.
You talked about we were talking about going outside and between art forms. As
Mhm.
far as the art in the book, though, you had some interesting thoughts on it, I thought.
Yeah, like it to me by the way, to the audience, I'm sorry my voice will squeak from time to time when I'm talking about certain things. I'm just giving a forewarning. Anyway,
Well, so does
uh,
Batman's.
uh, yeah, especially if you're Batfleck. Anyway, not to harsh on any of you Batfleck fans out there, because believe me, I did enjoy Ben Affleck as Batman. But anyway, back to the subject. No, I just find the artwork in here to just be so. I just find it to be so polarizing and just so like like one of the biggest reasons why this book grabs me so much is because if you go back to like a lot of the other Batman comics that came before this one, like not a single one of them, not a single bit of their art, of the direction and the coloring and whatnot, is comes even close to like how to like the nitty gritty and craziness of how this goes. But the thing is, it works for the story and the environment that they're setting up and trying to tell. Because, this is here's the thing. I don't just see The Dark Knight Returns as as just Frank Miller, Sin City per se. I see this as Frank Miller unleashed. Like to me, this is like DC being like, you know what, Frank Miller, just do what you want, and whatever it is, we back you 100%. And he's like, all right, and then he just makes this, and DC is like, all right, let's send it off,
Yeah.
and and that's all she wrote, you know.
Yeah, then you get to print money forever. It turned
Yeah.
out to be the best investment you can make out of like like if you're I gotta think if you're the editor on one of these comics, that's such a home run for you to be the name that said yes
Well,
to one of the
well,
best comics ever that you gotta be.
and how, and also how could have DC have foreseen that this would be one of the best, products that they put out and whatnot?
Well, yeah, I guess that's got to be, it's not, that's one of those things where taking a chance on, we can talk about why it was so different in a second, but something that was so different from the other Batman comics of the time, like to have that kind of taste and vision is probably the best features you can have as an editor in anything. If you're like an executive in any kind of creative field, taste and vision have got to be like the top two things you have to be good at.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
It's
for sure.
and making extra strong coffee for your artists. You gotta
Definitely.
hope so.
Yes, they're nearing the end of their 18-hour work
Yeah.
at the DC Insane Asylum.
Yeah, just shake them awake. It's like, nice try, bud. Back to work.
No, but by the way, to any of you in the audience who may be artists who are working for major comic book companies, we really hope that that isn't the case for you. We hope you're just working regular work days and that you actually have a life to go back to when you leave your work at the end of the day.
Yeah, we hope you're not using your 10-minute lunch breaks throughout the week to watch this video in pieces.
Yeah.
We hope you get an
Yeah,
hour lunch at least.
yeah, or at the very least, at the very least, we hope that when your shift is over and you're able to go home, you're at least able to spare a few minutes to, watch a couple of, autistic dudes just talking about this.
You've spoiled it. I can't believe there's no way they could have been able to tell that we have autism. There's
As
no indication
as if
that we
that
could
was,
possibly.
my friend, as if that wasn't apparent
Oh well.
already.
Oh well. But hey,
What?
I want to go back to the we're talking about why The
Yeah,
Dark Knight Returns was so different from the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
In those interviews with Frank Miller, he talked about wanting to opened the floodgates to bring in outside influences that hadn't been seen, that were just totally unavailable in America or
Yeah.
so limited. So
Yeah.
he referenced things like it was mainly European, usually
Hmm.
specifically French comics and
Yeah.
manga that would have been coming out in the 70s and
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah.
So, and that was the interesting thing, he talks about of course Mobius
Yeah.
for you can see a clear Mobius influence in pretty much
Oh,
anything Frank Miller
oh,
does.
for sure,
Like
for sure.
here,
Yeah.
hard boiled or a
Or,
ton of the other stuff he does. And of
yeah.
course, the most obvious comparison is Ronin and any of
Hmm.
the samurai comics coming out in the 70s and 80s, or stuff like Lone Wolf and Cub.
Hmm.
I think is pretty similar in the art style. I
Yeah.
don't know enough about the samurai comics of the time to be able to make that, to make specific comparisons. Frank Miller talked about, wanting to have the type of adult-oriented comics that France and Japan had that just weren't really available in the
Yeah.
US at a large scale yet. Like you could get like underground comics from the 60s. You could get, you could get the comics from like Playboy magazine, but that's about it for anybody looking for something that he felt was kind of not
Uh,
just corny, but almost like self-parody. But like I was saying, that's kind of the interesting thing I was exposed to those things before getting to The Dark Knight Returns. So really, I think it actually worked. Like I think the reason I was able to read things like Mobius, maybe even something like Asterix the Gaul, and of course, the manga I was able to get a hold of when I was younger. I think a lot
mhm.
of that stuff was popularized and made more accessible because you can see the style and the other influences in Dark Knight Returns, and you
Yeah.
can see, and especially opening up the adult market to comic books.
Yeah, cause like up until Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, like I think that most people, at least most comic publishers and artists, saw comic books as basically being a medium of entertainment for like children and whatnot. But then when Frank Miller started coming out with his stuff, he didn't necessarily see comics as being a platform of entertainment and whatnot for children, but rather as a platform of expression and artistry that anyone can get into and anyone can enjoy, no matter the age range and whatnot. And he just basically brought that into the open and whatnot. And that's what I think is one of the big reasons, not only why this comic is so well thought of by so many people, but why so many people like this, because of not just because of its writing and its artistry and everything like that, but what it did for the comic industry as a whole back in the 80s and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I think even Frank Miller would agree with you probably, and probably probably comic book editors, people like that at the time too. It wouldn't surprise me. So much stuff at the time would have been like parodied by Mad Magazine, or he especially Frank Miller brought up the how the comics were being influenced by the Batman show from the 1960s. Like it became not, the Batman show was sort of a parody of it, but but funny on its own and not really like not thumbing its nose, not sticking a middle finger,
Yeah,
that kind of thing, like a
yeah,
sort of goofball parody kind of thing. But that
yeah,
was like it started influencing the comics more, where it shaped. I think that's what you talked about, where it shaved down a lot of the edges. You had to focus on, from the Silver Age. People make fun of Silver Age comics all the time, which
yeah.
I don't agree with. But you could get away with Batman has to go on a date, but it's the Joker in a wig or something. It was like goofball, almost self parody, or Batman's villain
or
has a mood ring that turns him
or
into a zebra or something
or
like
or
that.
like or like what was it? How I on the flip side of that, I think you had Silver Age Superman, who could basically destroy entire solar systems with a
Yeah,
sneeze.
it goes like, it's reaching in to me interesting and kind of funny directions. But I think if you're Frank Miller and you're somebody who's like, you think of yourself as a serious art artist and you want to work in comic books as a serious art form, you're probably sick of that being the only thing that's available to you in
Yeah,
comics.
because because like you said, when you're a serious artist and you're like, okay, I have a specific idea, vision, and this is what I want to do. And the industry at the time is like, but we're doing this. And Frank is like, but I don't want to do that. I want to do my thing, not this.
Yeah, and it takes breaking in with something like his Daredevil series to really
Yeah,
to be able to get that foot in there, is like put your foot down and go, no, this is something you can do.
yeah,
Let me show you, for whatever else worked out for him to say, hey, this is for someone higher to say, hey, here's your chance, go for it. And for it to work out this well, pretty
absolutely.
impressive.
Absolutely, for sure, and seriously, I'm not gonna lie. I think me, you, and all the other surplus people who've read this, I think every single one of us is grateful that Frank Miller really stuck to what he believed was right and was able to deliver this to everybody, and that this made such an impression on, so many
Yeah.
people and
Well, and
whatnot.
his co-artists of Klaus Janson, who did the inking for it, and
Mhm.
his former wife Lynn Varley, who did the coloring.
Yeah.
I know I'm reading it off the comic, or I did look it up earlier, but I had to remember what the names were because this again my first time reading the comic, so I haven't
Yeah.
delved extremely deep into it. This is sort of casual conversation about it.
But no, it's fine. I mean, you have your experience with it. I've got mine, and
Yeah,
we're we're both just doing this because we're contributing both of our ish to try to make something good and whatnot, and that's what I feel that we're doing here. So
yeah. Well, did you
yeah,
want to get
but
into
but
any of the like the social commentary or like the
um.
the political parts? Because I had some bits and
Actually,
pieces and notes.
yeah. I think but before we do that, folks, just so you know, we're going to be getting into some razor sharp opinions and perspectives about some of the really nitty gritty bits of the story. So if by the way, for all of you who have kept on watching thus far, we are grateful that you're still here. And to those of you who clicked away, found something better, well, you know what? We still hope you have a good day. So, with that aside, let's get into it.
Yeah.
I yeah, no, I think that when Frank Miller initially created this, I'm not gonna lie, some of the commentary that's in this, like not only like, and here's the thing. My buddy Nate, it says on the thing that we only have a minute 40 left on this.
Okay. So
Um,
let's close it here, and then we
okay.
can edit another part of it.